Co-main event, Gunnar Nelson defeats Alan Jouban, guillotine choke there in round number 2. And Jouban, and this is not anything groundbreaking, but doesn't necessarily get the credit for his striking because of his grappling, right? But he said that going into this fight, he just, or in the octagon, I should say, he just felt different. I think there's a different confidence now for Gunnar Nelson at this stage of his UFC career with a wealth of UFC experience now. You know, you have to believe that if he were to fight a guy like Rick Story again, you know, he probably wins that fight, which he lost a 5-rounder by split decision back in 2014, has won 3 of 4 since, only blemish against Jimi Manuwa, obviously, which is no easy task. So submission wins over Brandon Thatch, Albert Tumenov, and now Alan Jouban. Gunnar Nelson is a real problem, Kenny, and I do think a top 10 guy right now at 170 pounds and competitive really with anybody in that top 10, at least in my opinion.
I agree, man. I think he learned a lot from that loss against Jimi Manuwa. I think he stepped it up in all accounts, all aspects of his game. And he had that kind of swagger about him. He had that confidence heading to that octagon, similar to what Conor had in his fight against Eddie Alvarez. You could see it on his face that he was not going to lose that fight. And, you know, Gunnar is pretty stoic in his approach, but there was just something about him that night that made me comfortable with picking him. And Jouban is a tough out for, you know what I mean? Yeah. Jouban's a tough out for anybody. He's very well-rounded. He's solid everywhere. He's a guy that doesn't make a heck of a lot of mistakes. But Gunny just seemed very loose. And, I mean, in all aspects, his punches are like whips. He just seemed very composed. And those shots were just brutal, man, that he landed on Jouban. And if you put your head forward and you're in that front headlock position, Gunnar Nelson's going to take you out, man. His guillotine is legendary. I've seen him, man, out-wrestle and out-grapple some of the best fighters in the world. I've seen it with my own eyes. I knew this kid was going to be something. And now we see it with his striking. His striking is catching up with his high-level grappling skills. And I agree, man. He's someone to watch, and he's a guy that, deserves to be in the top 5 right now.
And we love him here because he doesn't cut any weight, right? Smarter than the rest of you guys,
he probably...
You know?
Dude, he probably walks at like 180 pounds. I mean, you just don't see that. Most of the guys who fight at welterweight are at 190 pounds, maybe plus in the offseason. Gunnar, he just fights basically at what he walks around at. He's doing it right. Doesn't use performance-enhancing drugs, never been caught using it, doesn't have that look. And just a phenomenal fighter, man, a real martial artist.
A lot smarter than you guys, not staring death in the face, too. You know?
That's right. That's right.
And, dude, I hate to harken back to that Rick Story split decision loss, but it was just sort of a weird main event there in Stockholm, Sweden a couple of years ago. And if you take that away, and I know you can't do that, but for the sake of argument, you take that away, he's 16-1-1 with the only loss by decision to Jimi Manuwa, who is about as suffocating a guy as there is to compete against in the world. So maybe we shouldn't be surprised at just how easy Gunnar Nelson seemingly made it look over the weekend. Now his coach, John Kavanagh, is calling for a fight against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. I think he tweeted something, let's see who the real Karate Kid is, or whatever the tweet was. I mean, that fight has real legs for me. I think the fact that Gunnar Nelson is on a winning streak and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is coming off a loss, at times that has given the promotion pause to make that fight. But Joe Silva's not walking through that door. You know, maybe that was part of his philosophy. I don't know. But I think this is a fight that could certainly headline an FS1 show, and I wouldn't be surprised at all to see them make it.
There's no doubt about that, man. And what kind of confidence does he have when you're calling out Wonderboy?
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, coming off of a loss and a guy who no one really wants to fight, Wonderboy is so dangerous. But I think Gunnar is extremely confident right now with his jiu-jitsu, with his striking. He's keeping the proper range. He's very relaxed. And, yeah, I agree, man. That should be a main event of a FS1 Fight Night. I would love to see it. I think that's a smart approach because you beat a guy like Wonderboy, and if you do it convincingly, you get a title shot.
Chito Vera is going to join us here in about 5 minutes or so I don't want to spend too much time on his fight against Brad Pickett here because we're going to talk about it there. But at least for Brad Pickett, right, it looked like he was working his way towards a win, and to go out on top with a win in his retirement fight, like guys like Chris Lytle and Mark Munoz have been able to do. And Chito Vera certainly had other ideas. So unfortunately for Pickett, this career ends with losses in 6 of his last 7, sandwiched around a split decision win over Francisco Rivera. But there's no denying how much he has meant to this region and to this sport, and how many big spots he found himself in repeatedly. Let's not forget, this is the last guy to beat Demetrius Johnson back at WEC 48 by unanimous decision. Granted, that was not at 125 pounds for DJ, but he's been a bonus machine throughout his WEC and UFC tenure, and just really leaves an indelible mark on the sport. I am not the only one who's going to miss Brad One Punch Pickett.
Yeah, my heart breaks for him. Obviously fighting in his home country, I know he wanted to go out with the win. Chito, obviously a very tough out. And even in that first round where I thought Brad Pickett won, you could see that Chito was figuring out Brad Pickett. He was landing some shots that were really getting me to be very concerned for Brad as that fight moved on. I think the only thing that was going for Brad was maybe Chito was going to gas late in that fight. That really never happened. And Chito just kept chipping away, looking for those big shots. And Brad defensively, was putting himself in harm's way. And ultimately it was Chito getting the win in phenomenal fashion. But what a fight. And at the end of the day, man, that does sum up who Brad Pickett was as a fighter. He's a guy who was always moving forward. He always had that shot of looking for the knockout, had that kind of power, very well-rounded, as tough as they come. And even after the fight, he's like, I really wish they would have let me at least get knocked out cold. I mean, that's who Brad Pickett is, man.
Right.
So,
right.
Brad, thank you for all the amazing fights, man. You are a stud.
Given how this card played out, I mean, we're really supposed to lead the show with Floyd Mayweather, Conor McGregor today? I mean, really? Maybe time permitting, we'll get to it later in the show, and I don't mean to be so dismissive of it, right? But there's a lot to talk about out of this UFC London show. I'll make it quick here because Chito is standing by. Arnold Allen, Makwan Amirkhani. So we both liked Arnold Allen going into what was a very difficult fight against Mr. Finland. Arnold Allen wins by split decision here, a couple of 30-27s, and then the 28-29 for Amirkhani. I thought Arnold Allen won this fight. I mean, 3 relatively close rounds, but I thought Arnold Allen certainly won 2 of them. And even though this fight was not perfect, there were mistakes for Arnold Allen. There were times where he compromised position and put himself in bad spots that seemingly he didn't need to. But, count me among those who are very excited to see just how far Arnold Allen can take this thing.
A tremendous amount of potential in Arnold Allen. Amirkhani is not an easy out. He's a guy who is extremely strong for the weight class. He's big for the weight class. Used a lot of energy early on. Kept a very fast pace. He's one of those guys that makes it a hectic fight out there, and it's not always easy to kind of get your composure when you're dealing with someone like Amirkhani. I thought Arnold Allen did a great job of adjusting and finding his little spots to win the scrambles against a guy who's very good at winning scrambles himself. So I thought it was a nice performance from Allen. I did think he won for sure. Just a great fight and a great fighter for TriStar, and a great guy who's going to be representing the UK moving forward. He's definitely someone to watch.
Same can be said of Mark Jacasey. Massive knockout of Timu Pakalan. Jacasey really seems to have all the tools. Don't mean to shortchange him here today, but I want to quickly talk about Joe Duffy and Reza Madadi. And really from this context, it was an outstanding fight, and fittingly it was, because this, Kenny, I'm not sure if you saw my tweet, was the final fight made by our outgoing matchmaker, Joe Silva. He had 3 matchups on this fight card. And even though he sort of ended at UFC 207 last year, there were still fights that he made trickling in here in 2017. So the final fight made by Joe Silva was Joe Duffy, Reza Madadi. And Joe Silva, he made his first fights at UFC 30, February 23rd, 2001 in Atlantic City, New Jersey, I believe. So 16-plus years of fight making for Joe Silva. It ends with Joe Duffy and Reza Madadi. So wanted to shout out our good friend there, Joe Silva. And, his loss is going to be felt. I mean, obviously, it's all systems go for the UFC, but Kenny, really just no denying. I don't know what your personal dealings were like with Joe Silva at times as you worked your way towards UFC title shots, but my experiences were very positive, and there are a few guys who I learned as much from, not just about mixed martial arts, but the whole matchmaking process than the all-time great Joe Silva.
Yeah, my experiences were very positive in working with Joe Silva. We had disagreements at times, but always able to work those out. And talking to a fellow mixed martial arts nerd like Joe Silva was always amazing, man. And he was the guy who actually got me involved in commentating, in doing analyst work, because he was the guy who actually brought it to the attention of the UFC. Hey, let's have Kenny, as the third guy in the booth. He may fight the winner of Clay Guida and Roger Huerta. He's like, we should get you in the booth, to kind of commentate that fight and kind of maybe hype up your fight against whoever wins that fight. And I was like, okay, let's do it. So I always love talking to him about fights and breaking things down. And, Joe Silva is the guy who's responsible for my current career. Love the guy. Yeah, love the guy. It's an end to an amazing chapter. And, man, Joe Silva has done so much for the sport. And absolutely, we are going to miss him.